active transport, super important. All right. First, what I want to do is quickly remind you what facilitated diffusion is. Facilitated diffusion uses a protein and also uses a concentration gradient. So in this case here, we've got high potassium inside the cell and low potassium inside the cell, outside the cell, outside the cell, inside the cell. Potassium is going to be able to move spontaneously from the inside to the outside. It needs this protein here to do it because it can't pass across the phospholipid bilayer, but it's going to do this spontaneously because of the concentration gradient. Potassium channels are really important, and this is the direction potassium usually moves. These would be leak channels. This does not need anything to open. So this is going towards equilibrium. We don't always want equilibrium. Wait a minute, I've been talking about all these systems going toward equilibrium. Remember our homeostasis lecture? Our bodies actually need to be in disequilibrium to maintain homeostasis often. Sometimes, and our cells need to be different on the inside and the outside. And remember, you looked at this graph that demonstrated that. So these ion concentrations are maintained homeostatically within a normal range, but not in equilibrium. There has to be unequal concentrations of these ions inside and out. High sodium and chloride outside of the cell, ECF, and high potassium inside the cell in the ICF. So in order for the organism to maintain homeostasis and function, these have to be maintained in disequilibrium. Maintaining something in disequilibrium takes energy because there's always that drive towards equilibrium. So this is going to require energy. Maintaining disequilibrium takes energy. This is going to be active transport. So not only do we have a protein in the membrane, we also have a protein that uses ATP. The sodium-potassium pump is one of the most important things that you should make sure to learn because I will talk about it all year. It's one of my favorite proteins. It's also called sodium-potassium ATP pump. It's an ATPase, so you'll see it written that way. What that means, an ATPase, is that it breaks down ATP. So you need to be flexible with, like, you see something written in a different resource, you're not sure if it's the ATP pump, ask me. The sodium-potassium ATP pump is a specific one. What this means, ATPase, is it breaks down ATP, and in that, something can be done, work can be done. ATP, right, we reviewed this in our macromolecule, biomolecule lecture, is going to be broken down to ADP plus a phosphate group plus energy. So something can happen, lots of things can happen. For example, we can pump things against their concentration gradients. So that's what's happening here. There is high sodium outside of the cell and high potassium inside the cell. And this pump pumps these two ions against the gradients that already exist. I'm going to draw this. So let me get rid of this so I have a little bit more room. Okay, here is my cell. And this is also kind of one of those just things you want to be sure to remember, that there is high sodium outside of the cell. That was the graph we just looked at, right? And high potassium inside the cell compared to outside. If you know this, if you remember this, it will really help you with a lot of other things this year. So this pump actually is pushing sodium. Here's a pump this way, 3 sodiums out and 2 potassiums in. That's against the gradient, right? This has low potassium out here. There's not a drive for potassium to go into the cell, right? There is not a drive for it. there's not a drive for sodium to go outside of the cell. It's not going to happen spontaneously. So the ATP pump is needed. That energy is needed in order to do this. And that's how those concentration gradients in the previous graph are maintained. That's how our action potential happens, other transport, so many cell processes that are dependent on this gradient. It's like a battery, storage of energy with high sodium outside. So it's used to create a drive.